How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I am delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. We got a lot to talk about today, and I'm going to begin not with polling. Now, listen, I will get to the polling. I'll explain the Seltzer poll, the New York Times Siena, all that sort of stuff to you. But I actually am going to start the show with Peanut. That's right. Pour one out for Peanut. This is a weird way to end the campaign. You know, if Harambe was a harbinger of 2016, maybe the death of the squirrel and Fred the raccoon are a harbinger of what's to come. Signs pointing to Trump. It's just a weird story. So a man, turns out he's an OnlyFans guy. He's had a squirrel for 5 years named Peanut. Peanut is was a squirrel who his mother was run over by a car, and Peanut was tiny and unable to take care of itself, so this guy adopted Peanut, the squirrel, in New York. And Peanut became an online sensation over the years, would run around this apartment wearing a cowboy hat, and the guy also rescued a raccoon. Side note, my wife wants a pet raccoon worse than anything. She is obsessed with raccoons. And I have a friend who's a very prominent national reporter, y'all would all know, who every time there's a violent raccoon attack somewhere, he sends it to me and says, they're going to claw your wife's face off. Tell her not to get one. Yeah, my wife really wants a raccoon. Well, in this case, this guy rescued animals. Now, in New York State, it's against the law to harbor wild animals without a license. And this man was attempting to get a license for Peanut and Fred. Well, backstory here is he's had this squirrel for 5 years now, the raccoon for several years, and the squirrel, Peanut, became an internet sensation. Had its own Instagram account, was on TikTok, millions of views, went viral. And a bunch of online people, they were referred to in the story as Karens, but we try not to use that term to offend our friends named Karen, but that's how they were referred to in the stories. A group of online people, and you know and I know, and this is the term I use, they were awfuls. Affluent female white urban liberals who have too much time on their hands. And the affluent female white urban liberals, the awfuls, they started raising complaints. It's against the law to have a wild animal in your house. You have to let him go. And the guy's point was this wild animal, the squirrel Peanut, has been in my care since it was a baby. It could not survive outside. He lives inside my home. But the complaining of the internet mob was enough. That the Department of Wildlife showed up at his home and held him for 5 hours while officers attempted to capture Peanut and Fred. Peanut bit one of the officers trying to capture him, and that was enough. They had to check for rabies. Do you know how they check for rabies? Do you know how they check for rabies? They have to sever the heads from the bodies. Or at least that's what they like to do. You can't test for rabies with the animal being alive, so the good internet awfuls who badgered and harassed wildlife to liberate Fred and Peanut got Fred and Peanut murdered. The state murdered these two animals. New York State killed Peanut and Fred to test them for rabies. Did the internet horde know that Fred and Peanut would be going to their deaths? I suspect they didn't care. Think about this. The state of New York sent at least 6 officers to this man's apartment to capture a squirrel and a raccoon to murder them. This is why I support small government. Here's my buddy Scott Jennings on CNN.
Well, I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of Peanut the squirrel. God rest his tiny soul. Not since the squirrel that was taught to water ski has a squirrel caught the nation's attention like this one. Now, this squirrel was squirrel napped and murdered by the state of New York. An absurd abuse of government overreach. There are 40 million rats or something in New York, and they executed the only one trained to wear a cowboy hat and had an Instagram account. My condolences to Mark Longo, who cared for Peanut for 7 years, and to the cowardly neighbors who filed the complaints about Mr. Longo's animals, which also included Fred the raccoon. I ask, why are you the way that you are? I hope you're happy, you monsters. R.I.P. Peanut.
I'm not going.
There you go. Good for 7 years, not 5 years. I thought it was 5 years. 7 years. The squirrel and the raccoon weren't bothering anyone. It was just the internet activists, the mob. They didn't like that the squirrel and the raccoon were captured. This is news anchors in New York on the story. This is actually kind of funny. Those of you on radio cannot see the looks on this anchor's face, but just absolutely incredulous the state of New York would do this.
We have a very disappointing and sad update now on the saga of Peanut the squirrel.
You might have heard this little guy's been making headlines this week, and New York State officials now tell us the pet squirrel has been put down. Authorities seized Peanut from a home in Pine City, New York. It's a little south of Elmira. Apparently, there have been multiple complaints. Peanut's owner says the squirrel's mother was hit by a car, and he'd been taking care of the animal ever since. The owner runs an animal sanctuary and says he knows it's illegal to own a wild animal without a license, and says he was working to get Peanut certified as an educational animal. A raccoon taken during the same raid also put down. The State Department of Environmental Conservation says all this is done to test for rabies. All right, that's what Albany's focusing on. There.
Oh, looks on these two anchors. Y'all, this is absurd government overreach. And this kind of is one of the things the election is about. The neuroses of progressive white women. Because you don't even have to know the names of the people who complained, and you know them. You know, white, wealthy women are the most in-your-face, obnoxious people in America these days. They think they are your boss. They think they control everything. And they are the online hecklers who summon the Department of Wildlife to kill a raccoon and a squirrel because some guy is enjoying their company without their permission. How dare you? You know it's true. Now listen, those of you who are women listening to me right now, if you're not the affluent white female urban liberal who is in everybody else's business, I'm not talking about you, and I think most of you know that. But you know exactly the type of person I'm talking about. You don't have to know anything about the people who complained to know they were a group of affluent white female urban liberals. How dare this guy have a pet squirrel? And this entire election essentially comes down to the neuroses of these affluent female white urban liberals. They're the people at the grocery store who heckle you about whether or not you're going to wear a mask. They're the people who demand you get your 250th COVID shot. They're the people who insist that your child with Down syndrome should probably be aborted to save everybody heartbreak. They're the people who insist that their opinion must be heard and that if you dare to question them, well, you're a misogynistic bigot. They are the people who believe they're going to have to wear a Handmaid's Tale costume if Donald Trump gets elected. It really is absurd. They are neurotic. They are bossy. They are in your face. They are opinionated, and you're not allowed to question them. And they get this look in their face, this mean look. Y'all know exactly who I'm talking about. They just have to share their opinion. They just have to do it. In this election in 2024, there are a bunch of stupid people on the Republican side. There are. Y'all, listen, the RFK fluoride debate, you know, he says we're going to ban fluoride. You know, fluoride in water is actually one of the health breakthroughs on planet Earth. There is a minimal amount of fluoride in water, but it has solved so many dental problems. You know, in Calgary, in Alberta, Canada, they decided, after listening to the stupid people, to get the fluoride out of water. Do you know dental disease among children went up 700%? Now, yes, there is a judge who has said we actually should see if it has any relation to the IQ. There is a study that fluoride in water at massively higher amounts than what we put in our water can cause brain damage, which we've always known. Fluoride can be a poison at high doses. We put in very minimal doses, and it has solved a massive amount of dental problems. So the stupid people are like, well, it could be making us dumber. Clearly, you have avoided the fluoride, and you're a stupid person. Singapore has 100% mandatory fluoridation in water at levels equal to the United States, and no one's questioning the IQ of their kids. So maybe it's not the fluoride, you morons. We got stupid people on the Republican Party side, the people who embrace RFK as some sort of genius because they can't figure out what's going on, and they're stringing lines together, and they've come up with this idiot as their messiah. The Democrats actually, by and large, all the data shows they do have a higher professional class. They do have people with higher incomes and more college degrees and the like. But here's the problem. They are full of insane, neurotic people. And I suspect this election is going to come down to Americans would rather hang out with the dumb people who question fluoride in water than the neurotic people who will get a squirrel and a raccoon murdered because some guy's having fun on the internet with them. It's the neurotics who are in charge of the Democratic Party. White progressive women have moved the Democratic Party so far to the left, they think it's perfectly fine for a boy to have his private parts cut off and a girl to have her breasts cut off, to conform their body to what their crazy mind says they are. And you're a bigot if you disagree. This election is about the conspiracy theorists versus the neurotics. And I think Americans are going to go with the conspiracy theorists who are dim-witted rather than the neurotics. Yeah, I'm sorry. Listen, if you want to call in and argue fluoride with me, have at me, because I know what the data is. And I know the massive number of countries that put fluoride in water, and no one's accusing their kids of having low IQs. We just have a bunch of busybodies on both sides. But the busybodies on the right, sure, they want all your children's teeth to rot and ruin America with dumb science that isn't really science. But on the left, they're getting squirrels and raccoons murdered in New York because some man had fun on the internet and, by the way, had rescued the animals. I want a government small enough that it doesn't have enough time or manpower to send 6 officers to spend 5 hours to capture a squirrel that was bothering no one. This is why I'm a small government conservative. I want a government small enough to be drowned in a bathtub if need be. And it's kind of the weird defining story at the end of this election season. A squirrel and a raccoon murdered by the state of New York because a bunch of whiny people on the internet summoned a mob, complained, and they sent law enforcement to capture a squirrel and a raccoon. The perfect story to end campaign 2024 on. All right, I'm going to explain to I was just sending her back an email. I got an email from Karen who emails sometimes. Why is it wrong for the government to say what pets we can and cannot keep? But it's wrong for me to want government out of adding anything to my drinking water. It's not about the data. It's about forcing something in my body that I, not the government, can choose to add to my diet or not. Fluoride's available as a supplement. It's not necessarily right for everyone to ingest. Problem here is that the amount of cost to you as a taxpayer by not putting fluoride in water. Just take Calgary, Canada as an example here. The cost to the government went up exponentially as the healthcare costs for children went up exponentially due to a 700% increase in childhood dental disease when they took fluoride out of the water. So it's all well and good for you to say this in the same way that you can say it's my right to wear a seatbelt or not in my car. It's not bothering anybody, except insurance rates for everybody go up because of it. It's the same principle applied here with public health. It's the same reason that your kids have to have vaccines to go to public school, to avoid spreading vaccines. Just because you are opposed to fluoride, I'm sorry. We have ample data going back to the 1950s about how it has lowered the cost for all of us to put minuscule amounts of fluoride in the water. And by the way, a majority of countries on planet Earth do it. And all the people are saying, well, it causes all sorts of problems. It causes obesity. It causes arthritis. These other countries that have the same level of fluoride and have done it for as long as us, they're not seeing the same problem. Causation and correlation, people so easily get it confused. But the fact of the matter is you are saving yourself and all the rest of us massive piles of money because the government is not having to deal with the dental problems of the children of the poor and the infirmed, and you yourself with your own kids and the amount of problems that your kids would otherwise have with dentistry. We do have before and after data on fluoride in water in this country going back to the 1950s and 60s. We've actually got the data and how much better and cheaper it is now to do dentistry in this country because of it. That's exactly why there's fluoride in our water. You can say, I don't want it, so go buy bottled water and don't drink it. But as for the poor who are not going to go buy bottled water, they're going to buy tap water, they're going to get it from their faucet. It's good for us as a society. I cannot believe we're having a fluoridation. And this is part of the problem with Trump having surrounded himself with morons like Robert Kennedy at the end, who's got us all off talking about fluoride and water instead of anything else with the Trump campaign. Robert Kennedy, the Trump campaign is actually furious with him. They say he went off the rails and hijacked the closing campaign conversation with his tweets about fluoride. But I'm talking about it because it's a story. He made it a story. And frankly, there are going to be a number of people who vote for Kamala Harris, not because they like Harris, but because they really hate these freaks Donald Trump has surrounded himself with and want to keep them far from power. So just keep that in mind. All right. Where am I going now, Kobe? You whispered something and I couldn't hear you. Hillsdale. That's it. Welcome. Hillsdale College. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today and you can get a free pocket constitution from Hillsdale College. Not only that, you can also get Imprimus. I finished reading my copy of Imprimus. I'll have you know, my mom got hers before I got mine and she beat me to it, but I have caught up now. Imprimus comes to your mailbox free of charge from Hillsdale College. I've been getting it since law school. You go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today. You fill out the information. You get a free pocket constitution. You get a free Declaration of Independence. You know, as a matter of fact, there's a woman running for, you may have seen her. She went viral in New Hampshire. She had a pocket constitution. She grew up in a communist country. She read our Constitution, became committed to liberty. She's now running for Congress as a Republican. You can get one from Hillsdale College and Imprimus and the Podcast Network and so much more. Go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today. Sign up with Hillsdale College. Start a great relationship with Hillsdale College today. ericforhillsdale.com. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. Glad to have you with me. The phone number 877-973-7425. Want to take Chad's phone call from Montgomery, Alabama. Chad, how are you, man?
Hey, what's going on, Eric? Good to talk to you again.
Sure.
So, like all GOP folks right now, I think all of our heads are exploding with all the data from all these polls and so forth. And I know you're going to talk about the Iowa poll here from the Register in a minute, but there's just my gut, and tell me if you agree with this, is that we don't really have to look at the polling data as much, although it's still favorable for Trump overall, because we have so much data on the ground about the early turnout. And so, for example, in Iowa, we've got the GOP with 130,000 vote advantage going into Election Day. In Pennsylvania, they're up. In Arizona, they got 188,000 vote advantage going into Election Day. In Nevada, 45,000. In Florida, this one's a killer, right? 854,000, right? Mm-hmm. And then in North Carolina, they're up 18% from what, this is the GOP, is up 18% in early votes from what they did in 2020. And they even have a lead in early vote in New Jersey. And to me, that just tells me that, the Republicans are definitely energized. I don't think they're balkanizing or they're cannibalizing their election day vote. I think the folks who are still energized are going to vote. But everything tells me, and then when you look at the depressed number of minority voters, in which they're showing in Pennsylvania and Georgia and North Carolina, I just don't see how this jives with the sunshine that some of these Democrats and liberals are trying to float here. And I noticed that Jim Messina actually may have spoken the truth over the weekend, and then Obama's former campaign guy who I can't stand. Mm-hmm. But at least Messina's like, you really got to look at these actual things that are on the ground. These people have actually voted, right? So I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you said that, because this is exactly where I wanted to go with this whole conversation. If you can listen to the streams, I'm going to let you go there. And let me talk about this, because people got freaked out by the Ann Selzer polling. Ann Selzer is the best pollster in America, but she doesn't always get it right. Here's what Ann Selzer does that makes her so unique and actually better than everybody else. She doesn't model her vote based on the last election. So what does that mean? People will go to the 2020 election. They'll say, how many white people, how many black people, how many Asian people, how many Hispanic people, how many old people, how many young people, how many Republicans, how many Democrats. Okay, that's the same model we're going to apply now for 2024. Selzer doesn't do that. Selzer looks at the number of white people and black people and old people and young people and men and women and everyone else in Iowa. And she polls those people. And she asks them, are you going to vote? She does not go pull data on who has voted in the past to make them a likely voter. She does not ask a bunch of questions about people's voting propensities. She just asks, are you going to vote? And if they say yes, she considers them a likely voter. It's actually way more simplistic than other pollsters, and the result is she's gotten better data than everyone else. But she's had clunkers, too. She, for example, projected a Romney win when Romney lost. She projected a Gore win when Gore lost. She doesn't have a perfect record. No pollster does. Here's what makes her unique, in addition to the way she asks polling, and this genuinely makes her stand out. She's willing to put a poll out that's a bad poll. And by the way, she deserves credit for that. Here's the truth. You talk to any data scientist in America, they'll tell you 1 out of every 20 polls by a pollster is going to be an outlier. That is, it's going to deviate from everyone else. What you're seeing in the polling averages right now is hurting. That is, a lot of pollsters don't want to come up at the end and be wrong. Everything suggests it's going to be a close race, so all the pollsters are putting very close polls out. Some polls are deviating from the extreme, and so what are the pollsters doing? They're adjusting their numbers to make it look like everybody else. The New York Times, Siena, and Ann Selzer are two of the very few who don't do that. They're not going to model their polling based on what other pollsters are finding. They're going to put their data out there, and if she's wrong, she's wrong. It's not going to end her career. It actually makes her a more credible pollster to pay attention to. Here's what I think Ann Selzer found. And the New York Times Siena poll and a poll out of Kansas are showing the same thing. There is a late-breaking shift to Kamala Harris of undecided voters. It turns out, whether you want to believe it or not, the kickoff last Sunday at Madison Square Garden for Donald Trump actually left a bad taste in people's mouths. People saw Tony Hinchcliffe come out, make the racist jokes. They saw all the talk about, the Nazis did this, blah, 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 blah. It actually impacted the emotional undecided voters. Remember, an undecided voter right now is an emotional voter, not a reasonable voter. And it did affect them. Whoever put Tony Hinchcliffe on that stage to start that rally should never work in politics again. It was political malpractice. But then came Joe Biden's garbage comment, and then came the jobs numbers, but then came Trump's Liz Cheney statement. And what we have found from the late-breaking undecideds in the deep focus grouping of the undecided voters at the end is that they had made up their minds, you know what, my God, the economy was so much better than his, I'm going to go vote for him. And in this last week, all of these issues from the Trump campaign made him, I don't know that I can actually pull the trigger. I don't want to go through 4 years of that much drama. That was the problem. But, and there's a big but here, I don't know that the shift is enough. There's a wild survey out of Kansas that shows Donald Trump with only a 5-point lead, and it is white women who are the problem. And this goes to the whole Raccoon and Squirrel story. I think what pollsters are finding, and in fact pollsters are very open about this, is that white liberal women love to talk to pollsters. A white liberal woman wants you to know they're a Kamala Harris supporter. A white liberal woman has the bumper sticker on the car. A white liberal woman has the sign in the yard. A white liberal woman has the camo cap. A white liberal woman has the sweatshirt. A white liberal woman is an advertisement for Harris Walls. And they are the people most likely to talk to the pollsters. So when Ann Selzer says there's been this big shift among older white women towards Kamala Harris, of course, those women are finding the pollsters and calling the pollsters themselves to say, you're never going to guess who I'm voting for. This is a problem that a lot of pollsters are starting to talk about, that older white women are more progressive, the single ones in particular, and they're seeking out they want people to know they're voting for Kamala Harris. And so you can accidentally oversample these people, and I think that's what Selzer did. So, yes, she's picking up a trend that's reflected in the New York Times, but I think it's an oversampling of these people. Trump voters are still the least likely people in America to want to talk to pollsters. They just want to go vote. And what are we seeing from the early vote? Kamala Harris's ads are all over Columbus, Georgia. Columbus, Georgia is a big military town. It is on the border of Alabama. In fact, Chad is calling from Montgomery, Alabama, and the rumor is down there that a bunch of Alabamians have bought a bunch of septic tanks, and when they learn how to drive them, they're going to invade Columbus, coming across the Chattahoochee River from Phoenix City. They hadn't figured out how to drive the septic tanks yet. Columbus, Georgia, big military town. And in Columbus, Georgia, you got the infantry down there, and you got a lot of people who live in the suburbs of Columbus who are very Republican. The suburbs around Muskogee County, Georgia, where Columbus is, are very Republican, but the inside of Columbus is very Democrat. Black voters in Muskogee County have only voted at 80% of the rate they did in 2020 for Joe Biden. The surrounding area, where all the white people, all the Republicans live, is at 110% of turnout from 2020. There are counties in North Georgia that have early voted their entire 2020 vote. In other words, you look at how many people voted early and Election Day in North Georgia, and there are counties where more people have voted early than voted the entirety of 2020, and they're white. You look at any county in Georgia where the black vote is disproportionate, what you find is the early vote is less than it was in 2020. By the way, you go to North Carolina, same thing. The black voters in North Carolina are not turning out at the rate they were in 2020, and white Republican voters are disproportionately turning out. Now, the question is cannibalization. That's what Chad and I were talking about in our phone call. Some Republicans are worried that they've cannibalized their Election Day vote. That is, that the person was going to go vote on Election Day, but they voted early. Well, those are the same vote. So how many more Republicans are going to show up on Election Day than showed up early? If none of them do because they all voted early, well, then you're not going to get a different result from 2020, except the black vote is down. And the amount of black voters who would have to show up on Election Day in Georgia and North Carolina to overwhelm the polls is something that historically has never happened. The odds of it happening now are slim to none. It's never happened before. Those are the things keeping the Democrats up. Those are the things concerning the Democrats right now. And the Democrats, like in Pennsylvania, are saying, but look at the disproportionate number of women who showed up. The problem here is in Pennsylvania, women are disproportionately Democrat. So a woman voter is a Democratic voter in Pennsylvania. That's all you're seeing, is you're seeing the Democratic vote turn out with these women. But likewise, outside of the Philadelphia area, you're not seeing an increase in black vote. Now, that's not to say there are a massive number of black voters in Pennsylvania, but in the Philadelphia area, there are, and they're not turning out. Meanwhile, the working class white voters and Hispanic voters in the Pittsburgh area are showing up to vote early, and they're probably going to show up on Election Day. It's notable that Kamala Harris is going to spend her entire day today in Pennsylvania. Let me give you the map as a lay of the land right now. Democrats should win Nevada based on the polling, but the early vote in Nevada is so much in favor. Republicans have never historically turned out to vote ahead of Democrats in Nevada, and they have. Democrats are going to need to win independent voters by about 7% on Election Day to beat the GOP. Arizona looks to be going for Trump. Georgia looks to be going for Trump. North Carolina looks to be going for Trump. Kamala Harris spent some time in North Carolina there. It looks like she's now given up on North Carolina. Trump started the day there. He's going to be in multiple places in Pennsylvania and then end in Michigan. He's doing more campaign stops than Kamala Harris. If Trump wins, forget Nevada. If Trump wins Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, Donald Trump only needs to win one of the three Great Lakes states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. Kamala Harris will have to win all three of the Great Lakes states if Donald Trump wins North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. She's got to win all three of them. She's got to sweep. And she's only focused in Pennsylvania. It sounds more to me like Kamala Harris is trying to help Bob Casey at this point in Pennsylvania than help herself. It sounds more to me like Kamala Harris is trying to save the Senate for the Democrats than save herself. Donald Trump is going to all the swing states. Kamala Harris is not. That suggests to me that Donald Trump is in this to win and Kamala Harris is in this to minimize damage for the Democrats. You can only extrapolate so much from the early voting trends. But what you can extrapolate is this. Republicans overall have voted at rates we have not seen since George W. Bush's successful reelection campaign in 2004. And Democrats in Georgia, I can tell you from talking to Democrats in Georgia, they are very horrified by the early voting number for Democrats. They're not disappointed. They're horrified by the early vote in Georgia right now. The black vote in Georgia did not show up early for the first black female potential president of the United States. And by the way, the same thing has happened in North Carolina, and they are very perturbed by it. One of the most aggressive groups out there for the GOP right now knocking on doors is Americans for Prosperity. They would love to have you join them as a interested party in fighting for common sense conservative solutions in this country. They can teach you how to be an effective advocate for those solutions. They can teach you how to be a door knocker and to persuade your neighbors, how to go to your state government, your local government, and advance common sense conservative reforms. They'd love to have you on board with them. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. They give you all the research they have on common sense conservative solutions, from school choice to fighting for families and small businesses. They teach you how to be an advocate to your friends, to your family, to your neighbors, to be a persuasive person for common sense conservative reform. And they're also willing to teach you how to be a real boots on the ground activist if you want to be. They're the largest leading conservative grassroots group. They happen to be on the right. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Go check them out today. Greetings, conversationalists. The phone number 877-973-7425. Braden from Flagler Beach, Florida. Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show. How are you?
Hi, Eric. It's Brandon.
Brandon,
Hey,
I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. No problem. Big fan of your show. My wife and I are both. So my question for you is on immigration. So if the Republicans take the White House, the House, and the Senate, this seems awfully simple to me, but why wouldn't they legislate that anyone crossing the border illegally is ineligible for citizenship and hence voting in future elections?
Oh, I think they might try that. Now, the problem is, of course, the filibuster in the U.S. Senate. They would have to get 60 votes unless they're somehow able to tie it to reconciliation, which, since it's not about fiscal measures, they probably couldn't. But they may be able to do some big compromise or at least turn it into a major political issue with the Democrats. I suspect you're going to see a massive flight voluntarily from this country of illegal immigrants if Donald Trump gets elected. And I think they'll start packing up and we'll start seeing them leaving on Wednesday if Donald Trump gets elected, Brandon. Thanks for the phone call. I said Brandon, and Charlie did write it out right. I got Braden. My buddy Braden had his birthday party on Saturday, and I wanted to go. And I want you guys to know, some of you were sending me emails. I was complaining on Friday. My mouth hurt so bad from these adjustments to the braces. And everybody kept saying, it's going to get better. It's okay. You got to give it a few days. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And by Friday, I honestly was thinking of pulling an audible and just telling my board op, you got to roll tape. I can't do this. It hurts so bad to talk. And everybody's like, oh, don't be a wimp, whatever. I had a very sleepless night on Friday night. I hurt so bad. And on Saturday, I finally had enough. I literally bought dental pliers from Amazon and was going to take them out myself. Instead, I called the orthodontist office. He's like, let me look at them. Sure enough, the wire had slid out of place and had gone into the lining of my gum and wrapped around. And I had just this massive ulceration in my mouth. He was able to take care of it. It feels way better. It still hurts, but boy, is it way better. And everybody's like, oh, it's going to get better. It's going to, it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Sure enough, it wasn't in my head. It was a real issue. Thank goodness. Gosh. Okay. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you're in the business of business and you're looking to grow, reach out to First Liberty Building and Loan. They love to help businesses grow. They've been making their own business decisions since the 90s. FirstLibertyGA.com. FirstLibertyGA.com. Reach out to them. Tell them I sent you. And see, my friends, what they might be able to do for you. When we come back, you need to be here for the next hour, but for the next half hour in particular, here's a story. It's not getting a lot of coverage, but did you know that the Chinese right now are reading every one of your text messages? Did you know this? Unless you've got an iPhone, the Chinese are reading every single one of your messages right now.